Wrestling with the Future. Normally you would see Jeff the Ref Robinson with me tonight, but I have a very special co-host. He is marvelous Mike the Movie Maker Messier. Hey, Mikey, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really happy to be here. The guiding light is with me, as always, Angelo. And we have got a very special guest. Why don't you tell everybody about him? Our
guest tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is Sal Corrente. He is the official autobiographer of Bruno Sammartino, and he will be talking about his book, Bruno Sammartino, the autobiography of wrestling's living legend. You'll join that conversation in progress in a moment. Mikey, let's talk for a moment about wrestling this week. What happened this week in our wonderful world of sports? I hate that sports entertainment. What happened to wrestling?
Well, the news is a little bit old at this point, but they're building towards Drew McIntyre versus Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania over the WWE. Most likely they're going to get to a Roman Reigns Fiend championship match as well at WrestleMania. Of course, they're going to take a side tour into the Saudi Arabian shows, kind of the controversial Saudi Arabian shows where you'll be seeing Ricochet versus Brock Lesnar. Probably more compelling for me, at least last night, on AEW, Cody Rhodes or Cody had to accept the 10 lashes from MJF, Maxwell J. Friedman. A very old school angle, very emotional angle. People are praising Cody for actually taking the lashes. MJF getting old school heel heat. So I think that was probably the major storyline over there. And they're looking towards that February 29th AEW pay-per-view. It'll be Cody versus MJF and Chris Jericho versus the former Dean Ambrose, now known as Jon Moxley. And it should be quite interesting. It should be quite interesting to see how this...
It should indeed. It certainly should indeed.
Will there AEW...
Well, Mikey, tell you what, without further ado, Mike, let's get into our conversation with Sal Corrente, the author of Bruno Sammartino, the autobiography of wrestling's living legend. Let's join that conversation in progress right now.
There's Thunderfoot, a guy named Gene Ligon. They worked in the Kansas City territory and NWA, he took a punch from Bruno when Bruno was a special guest referee in a match. And he came back, he said, "Oh my God, Sal, you should have seen the bump this guy took for me." But when Gene came back, he was so proud of what he had done. Here's a 65-year-old guy knocking you out of your rear end, and he's thrilled to death over it.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah, Bruno didn't get that. But
yeah,
from that,
I got to tell you, Sal, I knew Bruno. I first met Bruno. I was a young kid. I was 7 years old. I met him at the Philadelphia Arena, at the old arena at 45th and Market in Philadelphia. And I met him there. I was a little kid. He was my hero. He was my hero till he passed. And as I got older and got to know him a little bit, and would have lunch with him occasionally and have dinner once in a while, whenever he was in our area, it was always a big thrill. Bruno had amazing stories. And I'll tell you one, and you probably know this, Sal, but I have never heard Bruno speak ill of anyone. I've never heard him cuss or utter a foul word. He was just always a class act. And that transcended from my childhood into my adult years.
That's right.
Was that always the case with you? I never saw this man ever lose his cool.
Well, I think there was one incident where he probably lost his cool with this Mark Madden in Pittsburgh. But as far as just being a class act and conducting himself, now I will tell you there were a couple of times that people would just pester him to death. And he would let me know that, and don't get me wrong, it's not that they asked the question one time, they asked it 10 times. How many times are you going to say no before somebody understands this isn't an appearance you want to make?
Yeah, sure.
So at that point he would get a little frustrated and he'd let me know, you better let them know the next time there's going to be a different discussion. And, so I did. And that was as close as it got to any kind of an issue.
Yeah. Sal, I read quite a bit of your book. By the way, I want to tell everyone, once again, the book is Bruno Sammartino, The Autobiography of Wrestling's Living Legend. It's the only authorized biography of Bruno, not only authorized by himself, but highly endorsed by and authorized by the family of Bruno Sammartino, his wife Carol, and his kids.
One of the things I want to mention about the book before we get back to the original question, which we seem to have kind of swayed from, is the book comes in black and white and it comes in color. Color printing, of course, is extremely expensive, so the book is expensive. But what I will say is this. The people that have bought it, the real Bruno fans, and, some of the guys have been, that I've met along the way through social media, and, then they interacted with Bruno. And I've gotten to meet a few of them in person. Mike Miggett out of Johnstown, PA, Benny Scala out of Florida, are just a couple of guys that really have an amazing, experience in their mind over the years of watching Bruno, and these guys are true fans, and there are many others, I'm sure. Tony Rocca is another one.
Oh, sure.
These
absolutely.
guys are absolutely Bruno people. But so those guys, I think some of them have the color version because the pictures, there's over 250 color pictures, and there's over 400 pictures. The book is 568 pages long, which is pretty big for a book, and it could have been 1,000, but at some point we had to stop.
I'll tell you what, it's an amazing book. It's, you get a couple of these books and one in each hand, and you can do curls with them.
Yeah, I would say that's true. So the legacy of the book is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead, Mike Messier.
Sal, this is Mike Messier, and just as a writer myself, I am very fascinated by how this book has come to be, your involvement, because I want fans who are interested in Bruno Sammartino to buy the right copy of the book, because there are 3 editions of the book, from my understanding. There's the 1990 edition, which I have, and that's before Bruno and you got together. Then there's like a 2004 edition, I believe, which you kind of improved, but there was so much more to tell. And what the great thing about your book is, Sal, that before Bruno passed, you were able to work with him, get this book twice as long as it was originally, and this is the definitive edition, so to speak. So I just want to make sure that people get the right copy, the right edition, because the cover is kind of a cover of Bruno kind of posing with his shirt off, kind of in his wrestling trunks or his weight training trunks. It's not the prior edition, correct?
That's right. And Bruno picked the cover photo himself. He let me know, early on that this was what he wanted on the cover. So that's what we went with. It's the Thinker. It was one of Bruno's favorite pictures. So that's what we went with. So this is what I can tell you guys, how this all came about. So the original book was put out in Pittsburgh. I really knew very little or nothing about it. Supposedly, there were many copies sold in the Pittsburgh market only. My understanding, it wasn't released anywhere else. Of course, there was no internet in those days, no Amazon or anything like that. So through some issues and battles, the book went out of print. Now, where it all started, I have one of these personalities that I can only listen to something for so long before I have to do something. I may not know what something is, but after I hear somebody complaining over and over and over, okay, well, where are we going with this, right? And Bruno's complaint was this. Bruno was all about the fans. When we made appearances, he wanted to make sure every fan got what they wanted, every fan was satisfied if he was going to come out and do it. Well, many fans would complain because the book, of course, was out of print. But what people would do is when they saw that Bruno was making an appearance, they'd throw the book on eBay for about 4 times the price, maybe 3 times the price. And, of course, when they go to get it signed, they complained to him like he was the one selling it on eBay. Of course, he wasn't.
Right.
But he felt very bad that people had to spend all this money. So finally, I said, you know what, Bruno, this is what I'm going to do. And I was, new to some of this stuff. I said, Bruno, I'm going to go buy the book myself. We'll invest a few $100, whatever we have to do to get a few copies. And I'm going to see if somebody can scan it into a Word document. So that's what I did. And at that point, I found somebody, I believe, in Raleigh, North Carolina. It wasn't anywhere near as bad a process as I thought, and it wasn't all that expensive. Obviously, it was several $100. It was a lot of work, but it was exactly what we needed. So I had some Brian Thompson out of the Arkansas, Missouri area, and Brian Trammell that was doing wrestling. I wrote a blog for them for a while. I don't remember. He covered the Memphis territory and some other stuff, but we put the book together. Brian was a fairly good editor, and at the time I needed an editor. The original, if you read the original book, Mike, that you have, you're going to see so many misspellings, and people were critical of that. And so Brian at least was able to get the book in a much better condition and correct a lot of the wrestlers' names and stuff like that to look like somebody actually cared about this book. But the goal was very simple. Have the fans stop complaining. So we put the book out. To be honest with you, we never thought about advertising it much. We never thought, hey, maybe there's a ton of money to be made here. It just wasn't what we did it for, right? And I didn't have a big obsession with it. So we put it out there, and I think it's been out there since about 2008, actually. And it's gone well. Every now and then Bruno would do an interview. I'd say, hey, Bruno, don't forget to mention the book. Oh, yeah. This wasn't something we were excited about. Now, sometimes Michael Bocchicchio out at highspots.com, if he knew I was making an appearance with Bruno, he'd send me 100 books, and we'd have Bruno do sign. Or if we had Bruno at a Wrestle Reunion appearance or something, Bruno would sign copies of the book. Whatever it was. So, we had some of those. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that again with the new book before Bruno passed. But eventually, Bruno did some interviews, and we just left it like that. Now, people, of course, had always complained that the real story wasn't told. He was still, playing kayfabe. Of course, in 1990, he sure was. Well, he didn't really want to do anything about it, so I didn't do anything about it. He didn't want to write another book. He definitely did not want to write another book. That was out. So, okay. So when I heard him do an interview or two, I said, Bruno, listen, you said some things in the interview. I was a little surprised, and I'm just being very straight with you. He said, Sal, what do you want me to do at this point? What do you want me to do? Everybody's out there talking. He said, enough's enough. I'm not going to look like a jerk. Okay. So if that's the case, if you're ready to talk, then why don't we update the book, do what people want? We'll yank everything out of there.
That brings up a point, Sal. Whether you know it or not, you prompted a question from me. That brings up the point. Did playing kayfabe, and people who knew Bruno knew that he kayfabed to the very end. Did that end up being a detriment to him? He played it so well. He was always true to the business. Loved him, liked him, or hated him. You always had to respect the fact that Bruno kayfabed. In other words, he protected the business. But did that, in the end, end up costing him?
Costing him in what way?
Costing him in reputation, in honesty, in forthrightness, truthfulness.
If it did, neither he or I know about it. I mean, obviously, I guess everybody has an opinion. But, no one ever said that to Bruno in front of me, and Bruno's never told me anybody said anything to him about it. And, I guess the bottom line is Bruno was always the guy that could back everything up, and maybe that's the difference. But, no, I'm not aware of anything like that.
And I think the great thing about the story of the book, and as a writer, I'm fascinated by it, Sal and Angelo, is because your persistence, Sal, you're to be commended that you were on a friendly enough term with Bruno Sammartino, the living legend, to shoot straight with him, to tell him that people weren't satisfied with the original 1990 version. You guys revisited it for the 2008 release, and then, as you were saying, you went back and added twice as much information. The stories were more developed. Maybe Bruno loosened up. I think that's what you were getting to, is that for this latest edition, the definitive edition, and people will know because of the photograph you described on the cover. Just look for the cover with Bruno without his shirt on. And also, I believe the difference is on your version, Sal, the word the autobiography of Bruno Sammartino,
right.
wrestling living legend. That's the difference. So look for the word the on the cover, everybody, in the subtitle, the autobiography, because it's definitive, meaning that this is the one to get. And I'd just like to say, if I could, guys, that I was watching Bruno Sammartino versus Ernie Ladd today on YouTube, and I was thinking that what a time it must have been for the fans, whether it was in New York, Philadelphia, Boston Garden, the Capitol Center. It was like the champion, the defending hero, Bruno Sammartino, in this case, in that era, was really fighting for the fans. The fans were living vicariously through the champion. And a 6'9" Ernie Ladd, with even at 6'9", he's playing the chicken-esque heel, so to speak. It's just a different thing. And I was thinking that Bruno was such a guy that people were so beloved to. Compare that to a John Cena. Nothing against John Cena as an athlete, but I remember watching John Cena matches, and he wouldn't break a sweat. He made it look too easy. Meanwhile, Bruno Sammartino, who's got 20,000 people there to see him, he's selling for Ernie Ladd, making Ernie Ladd look like $1 million. And it was just a different animal. And that's why people, young wrestlers, young wrestling fans, they need to study books like this Bruno Sammartino book by Sal Corrente. They need to learn the history of the sport of professional wrestling, because if you're just going to go based on the Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, Baron Corbin things you're seeing today, you're not going to know how to do professional wrestling the correct way, in my opinion.
Well, we appreciate that, but look, things do change over time, and sometimes we all just have to understand that times change. I mean, I think sometimes in my mind, and I never really did bring this up to Bruno, but there was a time when wrestling was all on the mat. So at some point, guys started backdropping each other. I mean, if you really think about it, going from never leaving the mat to now these big high backdrops on boxing rings and all this, right? So the business did progress, not to the point where it is today, where everybody's an acrobat, but certainly, as I was there in Allentown, right close, the first time that Tiger Mask fought Mr. Saito and dove out of the ring. I mean, the people were like, "Holy cow!" I mean, that was, to me, that was almost a shot heard around the world, because from that moment, things started to slowly change, right? The snooker leap was one thing. This dive, outside onto the cement floor was something people had not seen.
Sure.
But in regards to the different versions of the book, we are actually in control of all the versions that are on sale today via Amazon that are not the original version. And you'll see the original version is written by Bob Michelucci, and that's it. Now, there are not many of those, and anything that's available out there has to be, whether it's eBay or Amazon. That book has been out of print since 1990, so 30 years. Anything else, the reason I've left the second edition, and like I said, I had written blogs and stuff like that. I added a few pictures and just a few pages. That's one thing. In this case here, we ripped stuff out, we put stuff in, we added pictures. We got many of the wrestlers to make statements in regards to Bruno, and which I thought was a nice touch. Most of them, pretty much everybody, had worked with Bruno in some way, shape, or form, and or was a close friend. Davey O'Hannon is a great example. He's just a guy that Bruno used to say, "Stuff, Davey O'Hannon." Don't say, "Well, Bruno, look, we were on a show once when I first started refereeing, but no, I don't really know him. To be honest with you, I didn't get to know Davey. I would only hear about him from Bruno when we drove down to the wake. Me, him, and JJ Dillon took the trip down, and one of the stories that I do like to tell is Nikita Koloff moved me to North Carolina from Yonkers, New York. Got me a chance to go to work for Nelson Royal and his company while I was still working for the Crockett's. But I started full time for Nelson, so I couldn't really do much for the Crockett's anymore. Anyway, and when when I started hanging out with Nikita, we had a show in Philadelphia at the Civic Center, and they were doing TV. And for whatever reason, Tommy Young was not booked, and they did not want the referees that were assigned to work. So they put me in there. And
this is about 1987. This is 1987, Sal. About that?
It was either 87 or 88. It was in that time frame because I moved to the Carolinas in 89, and it was before that.
Okay.
There was they did 2 hours of TV. Whenever Dusty Rhodes fought Bob Eaton in the cage at the Philadelphia Civic Center, that's when it was. I'm the referee in the ring.
That was January of 88, I believe.
Okay, so and everything that happened that night that was televised, which was 2 hours, was me. The other referees ended up doing the dark matches. Somewhere along the line, JJ came to the ring for a six-man with Tully Arn and Ric Flair. And he said, listen, are you doing okay, first of all, because I was having to do everything under the lights. And he said, you holding up okay? I said, yeah, I'm fine. He said, well, come see me afterwards. I got some stuff I want to book you on. So, he gave me a half a dozen shots, Great American Bash. They were long drives for me, but he said, I think you'll make good money. And we were selling out every place, so it was the least of my worries. But, JJ obviously helped me out several times. And I never really, well, first of all, I had no idea there was a relationship between JJ Dillon and Bruno Sammartino. None. I didn't never even.
Oh, a very long relationship.
Well, that's right. I knew nothing of it.
A long and deep relationship. Bruno was very, very instrumental in JJ's career. Not only his career, but in his level of pay. Bruno made sure JJ actually got paid.
There's no question, and I've discussed this with Bruno and JJ many times. But at the time, I knew nothing. And finally, it hit me, because I would talk to Bruno about it, and I said, Bruno, I think that JJ went out of his way to help me because he was paying it forward from you helping him. I mean, he didn't have to do anything. I mean, I did the TVs. I got paid well. He didn't have to do anything for me. Well, if he said, hey, make this town or don't make this town, whatever. But he didn't. He went out of his way to tell me, that he was going to put me in these big shows. He did put me in the big shows. And I just believe that somewhere in the back of his mind, that he felt it was his time to pay it forward.
Well,
so
I'll tell you what,
Sal, very close.
You mentioned a couple of names here that are very close to me and very close to this show. JJ Dillon being one of them, Davey O'Hannon being another. I know Davey very well. I actually had him on as one of my first guests on the show. And
wow.
There's no question. In fact, I'll send you the link to that interview when we conclude this interview. But Davey spoke so glowingly, so highly of Bruno. In fact, Davey, dare I say, basically said, were it not for Bruno, I would not be here. He was the first guy to book Davey in Japan. He was the first guy to protect Davey from the promoters. Sal, that all the wrestling promoters are honest, decent men, right? You know that.
Oh, yeah. You kidding? Salt to the earth.
Yeah, exactly. And Davey speaks so highly of Bruno and its protective nature of the boys. And I have to tell you, Davey was very emotional in the interviews that we did with him. He just, he spoke about that last day when he found out that Bruno had passed, and just, he just kind of like let himself go. And to his credit, I will tell you that there's no questioning that this man's loyalty to Bruno was beyond reproach. And he is, again,
I would agree,
a friend of mine and a friend of this show. And in fact, we have him on in 2 weeks.
Well, great. And, I was very, very happy, especially getting to know Davey. We went to, if you look through the big book, there's a picture of us at Rico's restaurant after the wake. We went over there because we wanted to go to Bruno's favorite place, and they had a table. There's a picture in the book of the table set up in his memory, the same table him and Carol would sit in all the time. And, because I went there with Bruno the week he met Bruno Mars. We were doing a private signing in Pittsburgh. We were supposed to do another one, but of course we never were able to get to another one.
Yeah, and I just want to tell the backstory there. You know, phenomenal entertainer Bruno Mars, for those of you who don't know, was actually named after Bruno Sammartino. Bruno Mars' father was a big wrestling fan. And when Bruno Mars was born, they said, well, what are you going to name this child? And he looked at this kid that was kind of a butterball when he was born, and he said, he looks like a little bruiser. He looks like a little Bruno. So we're going to call him Bruno. Hence the name Bruno Mars was born.
And what I will tell you is this. You know, look, just for everybody who really knows Bruno, if everybody had just forgotten about him and went about their business in life, Bruno would have been okay with that. But that just wasn't ever going to be the case. Well,
Yeah.
when they called him about going down there, and I told him, I said, Bruno, if I knew you were going down there, I would have came to town a couple of days earlier myself. Because I wouldn't have minded meeting the guy. I said, but you do know this guy called you a big fat wrestler on. He said, Sal, I was prepared. So, you know, he went down, he met him, and that was fantastic. He spoke to Bruno's father, so I'm sure that was a very emotional thing for the father. But he said, hey, listen, I want you to see the big fat wrestler you were named after. And of course, Bruno put down a picture of him in his prime, and he just, I'm so sorry, I just didn't know. And, you know, but Bruno, because he had never forgotten, because he had heard that. And, and he never forgot it. I would have laughed when I was there, or if I had been there.
That's a great story, Sal. It really is. Sal, let me ask you about Colin Bowman. He was the final edit on this book. How important was Colin in the final edit, and what went in and what didn't, and what made the cut?
Well, let me say, and you know, Jimmy Hart and I, the Mouths of the South, are extremely close. We have been since January of 2005, so it's 15 years now. We were on a show together in Memphis. I asked him to do and I don't know what you guys know about my background, but I used to put on conventions, a company called Wrestle Reunion. We did some of the biggest conventions there were, and Diamond Dallas Page, who I've also had a very long relationship with, kept insisting that I was an idiot if I didn't book Jimmy Hart. I was an idiot if I didn't book Jimmy Hart. And I had worked with Jimmy a few times over the years, but he didn't remember me, and I wouldn't have expected him to. So finally, to be honest with you, Page doesn't let anything go if you know Diamond. So I said, enough's enough. I started calling the guy. He wouldn't call, but I was calling like every day. Finally, his wife said, hey, look, I'm sure you need to call this guy because he doesn't stop calling. So Jimmy basically declined and said he wasn't going to do it. Well, then I called Lance Russell to do the TV commentating, and Lance Russell refused to do it unless Jimmy did it. So we ended up being booked on the same thing in Memphis. I had brought Stan Lane with me up there, and he was supposed to team up with Steve Kern and Jackie Fargo. Oh, not Jackie, I'm sorry, Corey Macklin, but Steve couldn't make it for whatever reason, so it was Corey and Jackie and Stan. But I cornered Jimmy and said, look, are you going to do this thing for me or not? And he said, no, not. And then, you know, but I talked to him for 5 minutes. Finally said, okay, I'll do it. So he started talking to me about Colin Bowman, who I didn't know. I didn't know him at all. And, you know, I just said, look, I got enough on my mind. So, you know, bringing in somebody who's with Colin's skills, first of all, who knew if it was even true, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Well, eventually I listened to Jimmy. I met Colin. And you could see that he was just really great at every aspect of everything. Once I met him, there were no more Wrestle Reunion events without Colin Bowman, whether we did them in L.A. or anything else. Whatever we did, Colin was a part of that because he's just a guy who's good at most things. Well, when I was looking for somebody to really do the final edit on this book, I went a couple of different routes. It didn't work out. Finally, it occurred to me, and believe me, it took far too long to occur to me, that Colin was the guy. Matter of fact, I called Jimmy Hart and said, hey, Jimmy, I finally got an editor for the book. And he said, oh, really? Who's that? And I said, you can't guess? Oh, Colin. Yeah, right. But he was right. He was right under my nose the whole time. What I will say is this. I weigh Colin's opinion extremely heavily, sometimes more than my own. Final decisions, of course, were all mine. But I'm going to tell you, as a general rule, if Colin suggests something or thinks something right or wrong, for me to override Colin Bowman, I have to really be passionate, or it has to be the direction that I had gotten from Bruno. He didn't want this or he didn't want that, period.
Right.
But generally, I'll take Colin's opinion and just run with it, because it's, matter of fact, I can sit here and tell you one bad piece of advice Colin's ever given me.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you have not read the book, Bruno Sammartino, The Autobiography of Wrestling's Living Legend, I will tell you that you are missing out on a piece of wrestling history. It's an amazing book. The pictures are just phenomenal. By the way, Sal, I have the black and white version. So, and it was given to me. It's an amazing book. I will tell people that it is still available. It's still in print. It
won't be unavailable. It'll be there now, probably after I'm long gone. There's no reason to ever make it unavailable. And to be honest with you, I was advised the version that Mike spoke about, where I added some pages and it was just changed up a little bit. That has the Wrestle and Riot Online, which is the version those guys put out. I was advised to take it down, but to be quite honest with you, I said, for what? Why take it down? And much to my surprise, almost every month, 2 or 3 of those books are sold. So I don't know if people want to see the comparison of the old to the new, but that book is actually still selling as well. Certainly nowhere near what the other books are selling, but people still seem to want it. So why take it down?
Hey, Sal, this is Mike again. And, sometimes people are so voracious with their desire to own every piece of wrestling history, whether it's book, DVD, T-shirt, action figure. So I can see why that would happen. But I wanted to ask you, because we have you here, and this is a rare opportunity for fans, and just for the fans that don't know that much about Bruno Sammartino, try to imagine John Cena, Roman Reigns, or any of today's wrestlers holding a championship for 2 title reigns. Well, you can imagine that. But can you imagine those 2 title reigns lasting 11 years? You probably can't. And Bruno Sammartino defeated Buddy Rogers in May of 1963, I believe, held the title for 7.5 years before losing to Ivan Koloff. You could hear a pin drop in Madison Square Garden, they say, when Ivan Koloff beat Bruno Sammartino. And then you had a couple of years where Pedro Morales had the title, Stan Stasiak had the title for 8 days, and Bruno beat Stan, and Bruno had the title for another 4 years. And that type of longevity, you couldn't see one of today's wrestlers holding that. But here's my question for you, Sal. Having established yourself as a personal friend, a confidant of Bruno Sammartino, is there anything about him, a personality quirk or something that was just kind of funny or enjoyable about spending personal time with Bruno at the restaurants and working on these projects? Is there anything about Bruno that maybe you wouldn't feel that you're breaking confidence in sharing with as many fans? Maybe something that he had an interest or a favorite color or a favorite food that maybe we just wouldn't know about unless you told us?
Well, what I can tell you is when we went to Rico's, I don't know if you guys have been to Rico's, but if you haven't, and if and when you get to Pittsburgh, you need to go. Tell me you want the Bruno Sammartino meal. I will tell you the interesting story of the first time he brought me to Rico's. Of course, I had heard about it forever. But when I came to Pittsburgh for the signing, we went to Rico's. And the one thing that bothered Bruno greatly, and this is why I corrected it at the wake, a lot of times I'm not a celiac or anything like that. I do have a sensitivity that if I eat too much wheat or flour, I start to get bothered. But, again, it's not a celiac disease. But when I hear a place has gluten-free pasta, I'm going to get it. Well, Bruno wanted to buy me a steak. I mean, it seemed to be an obsession. And, but I got the gluten-free pasta, and he, Sally, you sure you don't want a steak? I mean, I'm halfway through my meal. I said, Bruno, I'm good. But on the way back to the house, Sal, the next time you come to town, we're going back to Rico's, and you're getting a steak. Period. No more of this other nonsense.
That's funny.
And so when me and JJ and Davey went back, I had to go back and get a steak, because I just had to, do that because it seemed so important to him that I have a meal. Now, one of the things they're going to bring out, if you said you want what Bruno would normally get, you would end up getting a bunch of figs. I had never, even though I'm Italian, no restaurant that I ever went to served figs.
Oh my God! Oh, brother, you're missing out. Huge.
Yeah, no, it was great. But I'd never been to a restaurant that ever offered figs. Period. So it wasn't something that I did. But to me, that was something that I'll probably remember the rest of my life. I mean, I don't know how many times. It had to be at least 10 times that he asked me, did I want a steak? And I just told the guys. I said, look, I don't know what you guys want to do. You want to go back to the hotel? You want to do whatever it is? But I have to go to Rico's. So no, we're all going to go to Rico's. So, we did. And there's pictures of that in the book with Rico there and, the maitre d' there that knew Bruno and so forth. But no, Bruno was a pretty straight up guy. The only thing I will tell you is he really didn't like being on the road. I'm very blessed. And other interviewers have asked me, just point blank, why me? And I said, I don't, I can't tell you why me. Because I don't know, but we developed a relationship early. He trusted me, and I represented him on appearances for close to 20 years, and it all just went totally fine.
I think I can answer that. Having known Bruno a little bit, I can tell you unequivocally, Sal, that Bruno was a keen judge of character. He had this almost like psychic ability, and I hate to use that word, but he had this innate sense of who was good and decent and who was not. And he knew when he was being bullshitted.
Yeah, I don't do that. I'm actually very, very, very direct. No BS. Whatever I tell you is what if I can do it, I'm going to tell you I can. If I can't, I'm going to tell you I can't.
Yeah,
and that's the end of it. But for being on the road, he didn't sleep. As a matter of fact, I was just telling Michael Bakikio from High Spots the other day. I mean, when we were on the road, if we were supposed to do something at 7, if I started heading down to his room at 6:45, he would probably be looking out the window of the room to see where I was. It's just his way.
Yeah.
And he couldn't sleep on the road. And for our last appearance, we were both in the lobby at 5 a.m. We did the big event in New York for Tommy Younger, and that was a pretty massive crowd there. And at 5:30, I think we were in the lobby. We went to eat breakfast. His son Daryl was with us. We did the last private signing for Michael from High Spots. I believe we did it the night before. And when it was all said and done,
right.
we finally went to eat, and he said, "Are we ready to go?" I said, "Well, yeah, we're ready to go, but go where? Where are we going? I mean, the event don't start for hours." But he wasn't a guy who could rest on the phone. He just couldn't do it. So that was the only thing. The only other thing that really stands out as a kind of always and forever thing is he did not want to do anything on shows after a certain point where he was beating these guys up. He just didn't want to do that, period.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it wasn't about not wanting to cooperate. It was about just not trying to take the shine away from guys who were trying to build a career. He really felt he had his time. He had made these appearances, and he was okay to make them from time to time. But that was it. Where he did offer me some consolations. Wrestle Reunion 1 in January of 2005. Bruno did not travel in the winter, period.
Right.
He just didn't do it. But, he came there for me. He came to L.A. for me when we did Wrestle Reunion, maybe 2010.
Right.
We did it in 2010, 11, and 12, whatever it was. He came, and he had been sick, and the doctor told him to cancel the trip. He said, "I can't." He said, "I can't for this guy." And he told me when we got there, he said, "Sal, for no one else am I here." Because first of all, he didn't want to travel cross country anyway.
Yeah.
But I remember those things because I'm so appreciative, because I'm like, why me? I mean, that's kind of, because to me, like, I used to tell him, and his sons used to tell him, Bruno, you just don't get it. You're Bruno Sammartino. Big deal. You're Sal Corrente. What does that mean?
Yeah, that was
I said,
lost
Bruno,
on
you'll
him.
never get it.
That was really lost on him. I don't think he fully comprehended, nor did he realize the impact that he had on people's lives. You mentioned his sons, Daryl, David, and Darren.
Well, it was Daryl and Danny were the twins, and Danny, has since passed away, of course.
Right.
Which was horrible. It really was.
What kind of relationship did he have with his relationship with David has been much maligned and much publicized by the wrestling mark community. But you never know what happens behind closed doors, and you don't know what happens, between father and son and the family dynamic there. What was instinctively or initially that was the wedge that stopped father and son from speaking?
I have to say that's a topic that I'm not free to discuss. And we didn't talk about David very much. Of course, David, worked for me several times. There's matches on the internet. I think refereeing matches he was in. If not, I was certainly booking.
Right.
Booking the thing. There wasn't, again, it's not a topic that I'm willing to discuss.
Okay.
The only thing I will say is,
Mikey, go ahead.
No problem.
Well, I guess it's a fair enough segue just to say that if people wanted to see a recent interview with David Sammartino, your good friends and my good friends, Monty and the Pharaoh, recently interviewed David. So if people do have an interest in how David's doing in the last 6 months or so, Monty and the Pharaoh out of your neck of the woods there, Angelo, recently interviewed him. So if people want to do further research.
True. Yeah.
I wanted to ask Sal a question. Just kind of opening things up a little bit, Sal. As someone who's been around the pro wrestling industry, the business, so to speak, for so many years, why do you think that the nostalgia of guys like Sweet Stan Lane, beautiful Bobby Eaton, Jim Cornette, controversial, but people still go to his opinion, Vince Russo's controversial, Eric Bischoff, Bruce Pritchard, all these guys that either be in front of the camera, behind the camera, the wrestlers, of course, themselves. I was very good friends with Ox Baker. And, a film that I did with Ox Baker will be played in North Carolina in 2 weeks. So at the Mad Monster Party Festival on February 15th. So my question for you, Sal, is what is it about professional wrestling that fans never let go of their heroes and they still, after 20, 30, 40 years, they come to these conventions? What has got us hooked so bad, Sal?
Well, it's not just around professional wrestling. I've worked with the Hollywood Collector Show in Los Angeles. Matter of fact, that's where I really learned the convention business, through Ray and Sharon Courts out of Spring Hill, Florida. But they were the first ones to actually take the step forward using the Beverly Garland Holiday Inn. Beverly Garland was an actress, and she was one of the only people to actually have her name on a Holiday Inn because she was a big deal out there in what was the countryside almost in those days when she bought the hotel. But they taught me the convention business, and they started out, if you remember the old Superman TV series with Robert Shane, who played Inspector Henderson, one celebrity, and it grew into eventually having 100 or so celebrities.
Right.
And, people from all ages and, from Gilligan's Island to, some of the more modern shows, to Leave It to Beaver, you name it. All these TV and movie legends. Mickey Rooney used to come all the time. Margaret O'Brien still comes, the Academy Award winner for when she was a child actress. And
Sure.
there's more names that I can name it. The Little Rascals, you name it. These people are all there, and people turn out. And the ones that really engage really make you feel good, because these are people you watch your whole life, and many of them still look totally recognizable. Some don't.
Oh, sure.
Who's to say? But if you remember your youth, Henry Winkler comes to these things on a regular basis. It's, engaging with Fonzie is like a big deal. Larry Hagman did the show for us many times. Last time I saw Larry, we shared a limo ride in Chicago. It's just one of those things. People from your youth. There's a guy in the book. His name's Richie Janatone. He used to play in my father's band. And for years and years and years, he told stories of Bruno coming to his grandmother's home. And I believe it was his grandmother's home. If it wasn't, it was a relative. But I mean, this story went on and on and on and on forever. And, finally I said, hey, Bruno, not for nothing, but there's a friend of mine. He says that, when you wrestled in Yonkers, which in the 60s was an outdoor ball field called the War Memorial Field, we called it the Glen. And he said, whose house did they say I went to? And I said, a guy named Kashmir Sabatini. And he said, Kashmir? He said, yeah, I was there. He said, some people from where I come from in Italy asked me if I would stop by when I was in Yonkers, so I would stop by after the matches. And when I knew that I was bringing Bruno to Yonkers for the last time, we got Richie, who is at this point about 65 years old. And he was just a little boy at the time. But he came down, and he was waiting at the restaurant. And there's a picture of him in the book, and there's a picture of him with Bruno. And he showed the pictures. This was the first time I had ever seen the pictures, right? Up until then, it was a story. Of course, Bruno confirmed the story, but it was still just a story. And then what I didn't know, and Richie had never said, was Bruno said, hey, Sal, look, Tony Marino's in here, too. He came with me, the Batman, if you remember Tony Marino.
Sure.
And so Richie was just a little boy, about 10 years old. Bruno was holding him up. They were clearly in the house. And this is just the kind of impact I think that you guys are talking about. When we left the restaurant, Richie stayed the whole night, of course. And, this is our neighborhood place that we've eaten at for years and years. Bruno's been there numerous times. And when we walked out, he said, Sal, the guy was crying. I didn't know what to do. And that's just the emotion of, meeting a guy who, a 10-year-old boy's watching Bruno on TV probably every week. Then Bruno actually walks into a relative's home, is hanging out with him, picking him up, playing with him. And then like 50 years later, or 50 or 55 years later, here he is again. It was just overwhelming, at a certain point.
He had that effect on people. And the one thing that always surprised me, and I believe it or not, Sal, I've actually borne witness to that myself on a couple occasions. I first met Bruno, as I said, as a child. I was like 7. The second time I met him, funny story, I was working in the casino business in Atlantic City. And Bruno was there for the Greatest Sports Legends Banquet, if you remember that.
Yes, sir, I sure do.
Okay, and I met Bruno and Carol that night, and I talked to him, on the floor, on the casino floor. It had to be an hour and a half, just talking about music and Italy and food, and never discussed wrestling one time. And he loved to talk about everything but wrestling. He seemed to shy away from it for some odd reason that I never really could figure out. He never liked talking about matches. He didn't like talking about the old days. He loved talking about his family, his mother and father, growing up in Italy, how hard it was for him. And on that subject, I want to encourage everyone to watch the film called La Mia Mama. It's Bruno returning to Italy, to his birthplace in Pizzaferrato, Italy. And Bruno and I struck up a friendship that night, and I was there at Bruno Sammartino Day in Swedesboro, New Jersey, when he was awarded a citation, and had lunch with him that afternoon and had dinner with him that evening. And it was just he and I and 2 other folks. And he was just a wonderful, wonderful guy that loved to converse and didn't really fully, as you said, Sal, he just didn't realize the impact it had on people.
No, sometimes he'd laugh. He said, I know, Sal, I don't get it. But his kids would tell him the same thing. And he really, honest to God, he was so humble. He didn't get it. Now, at the same time, he understood what he could do and what he couldn't do. And to go back to the titles, there's been a lot of great champions, and everybody can have an opinion who the best was, this, that, and the other. This is what I know. This is what I know for a fact. One, I'm not aware of any other champion who said either take the belt away from me or I'm quitting with the belt. Period. Now, that was the first thing.
Yes,
right?
sir.
Okay, so that never happened. When the second time came around, Vince Sr. and Vince Jr. flew to Pittsburgh to ask Bruno to come back. Now, common sense tells you they didn't fly to Pittsburgh to ask him to come back because everything was great. They felt they were in trouble. They felt the business was going backwards. I don't care what anybody says.
Absolutely.
And, sometimes we'd have that conversation, and
right.
Bruno wasn't on the same. But I said, Bruno, remind me again, where was the meeting? It was in Pittsburgh or was it LaGuardia? He said, Sal, it was Pittsburgh. They came. I said, that's right, Bruno. Just remember, the meeting was in Pittsburgh.
Right. They came to him.
And that's right. Now, with that being said, there were two things. One, when Bruno came back in the 80s to work with David, and the rings had graduated from a boxing ring to what he considered a trampoline. And of course, I don't care that even the rings of today, these rings are not built for what we do. Eventually I morphed into a wrestler. Now, I didn't have a lot of matches, maybe 100 or so, whatever. But the bottom line is it only takes one. And Bruno, I think, when he got in the back, he said, guys, if we had rings like this in my day, he said, I would have never even had to take time off. He said, I would have been champion 12, 15 years straight.
Sure.
The other thing is this. I am not aware of any card in the Garden where Bruno was the main event where there was somebody brought in to help draw.
Exactly.
But you'll see many times over the years, again, these numbers don't lie. Many times Bruno was added as a special attraction. Well, why is that? If the champion is keeping the house in order, why are we bringing in special attractions?
Well, if you're bringing Bruno in because Bob Backlund can't draw, that should tell you something.
Well, and look, I don't want to single out Backlund. He's not the only person.
That's just one name, Sal.
That's right, but that's a fact. And look, wrestling promoters don't like to be wrong, and I will tell you that at some point Bruno got a little bit upset because the promoter would call and say, "Hey, I heard Vince sold out the Garden last night. Backlund was on top." And they said, "They didn't tell you I was there?" No, they said Backlund was in the main event. Well, Backlund was in the main event, but sure. Bruno's matches would be a special added attraction, so it wasn't the main event. Now, again, if the champion is drawing, we're not even talking about a situation where Bruno had to be a substitute. There were many scenarios where they needed him as a substitute. And, the honky tonk man in the book talks about those times when Bruno had to step in for somebody and go on the road and so forth and things like that. No disrespect to anybody, but Bruno, the secret to Bruno is this, and this is where I just don't think anybody else really embraced this. In Bruno's mind, he was the guy that was going to be there. He was going to have to go to the Garden every month. He was going to have to go to all these other clubs, Boston, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, month in and month out. So what he did was he adjusted his style to meet his opponent. And, he would
Absolutely.
say, if I worked with Mike Cicluna, who everybody remembers, at a certain age, you remember Mike Cicluna as an enhancement talent for TVs and so forth. But if you go back to the 60s, Mike was a legitimate contender, right? And Mike did a lot of so he'd do high spot stuff with Mike. If it was a Don Leo Jonathan or a Big Bill Miller or somebody like that, he would do strongman stuff. If it was somebody that he could wrestle with, then he would wrestle. So it was always something different. The other thing that he would do, and this is referenced, in the book, is from time to time guys like Bull Ramos, maybe Tank Morgan, a couple of these other guys that promoters asked to be able to work in the Garden. Well, Bruno did not feel that these were guys, but they were big. Most of them were big, huge guys, right?
Yeah.
So these promoters wanted Vince to do them a favor. So Bruno said, so I went along. He said, as long as it was just one time around, because people needed to see me beat somebody without, program return. Sometimes I would just go out and just beat somebody, and that's it. So what Bruno did was he made it where he wasn't repetitive over and over and over and over the same thing, because these other guys were leaving the territory. Plus, Bruno had a lot of input into who his opponent. Like, he went to Japan. He ran into one of his favorite opponents, and a guy he spoke of often, very often. As a matter of fact, when I brought him up to New York and we were going to do some stuff, he was going to be doing an interview with John Layfield, and I told him, Bruno, if there's one guy that you want to ask about Bobby Duncan, it's Layfield. So he did. I asked him, I said, did you talk to him about it? He said, I absolutely did. He brought me up to speed. But Bruno discovered Bobby in Japan. And he had never heard of him before.
Sure.
And he said, do you want to come to New York? And he said, oh, geez, that'd be great. He said, well, give me your number. He said, Vince McMahon will be calling you. Then when he got back, Vince really wasn't very interested. He said, look, I never heard of the guy. It doesn't matter if you've heard of him. I've seen him. I'm telling you, we can make money.
Oh, God, we heard story after story like that from Davey O'Hannon. Absolutely.
So Bobby comes in. The one thing, though, he said, Sal, I had to remember before he went out on TV to say, listen, this is not Texas. He said, you go out there. He said, you can't give this guy any, because, of course, the territory was a little different, right? He said, you can't give this guy anything. This is not, these other territories. You just got to go in and eat them up. And, because that's what happened in those days. So,
yeah, Sal, Mikey and I heard a story involving Bruno and superstar Billy Graham. It was at a time when Bob Backlund was champion. And Bruno and Superstar, who had a cordial relationship, a professional relationship, both, as the story goes, conspired to try to hold up Vince Sr. And basically threaten him with leaving the company if they didn't take the belt off of Bob Backlund. Do you know anything about that? The validity of it? Yeah.
No, sir. No, it was never discussed between me and Bruno. Bruno, I would have thought would have brought that up, but no. And as far as I know, Bob and Billy were a cordial relationship. We were on a show one time in Manchester, Connecticut, and Bob and Billy were fine. That's all that I know. I didn't have a lot of interaction with Backlund. He never, I could not get him to appear at my Wrestle Reunion events. He wouldn't do it.
I should say for the record that superstar Billy Graham is a personal friend of mine.
Fair enough.
And I will tell you that he's none too happy with Bob Backlund. But that's between Superstar and Backlund.
Understood. The story I was telling you was at least 20 years ago. I was broken into the business by Alpha and Seiko, the Wild Samoans. There was a couple of guys, Mike DeVanzo and Dominic Marcello, that had used to come and take pictures of the guys and stuff and sell them at the Garden. And, they knew everybody, including Hulk Hogan, in his first run through. And they introduced me to Hulk, and Alpha and Seika basically trained me to the extent that I got trained, put me in the business. And we're still friends to this day. And, of course, Bruno was a big fan of those guys too. So,
absolutely.
We talk about those guys. I remember, Alpha would tell me, we worked with Bruno and, we went flying all over the place for him. But I remember Bruno telling me, he said, Sal, I didn't want him to do that. He said, those guys were big, rough looking guys. He said, I didn't want them flying over for me. He said, I wanted to build them. Even by the late 70s, Bruno knew that, in his mind, his time was over. And, he would have rather, made these guys look tough. But again, like everybody else, they were so proud that they went flying all over the ring for him.
Well,
So it was just a whole different thing.
Isn't it interesting that Bruno, by the late 70s, he was saying things about his own career, but obviously the Larry Zbyszko feud that so many people have as a hallmark of their lives from a fan's standpoint, and obviously that made Larry Zbyszko's career what it was. That Shea Stadium match and the chair shot heard around the world of Zbyszko smashing a wooden chair over Bruno's head. And so Bruno was even wrestling deep into, he appeared at WrestleMania 2. He was in the Battle Royal along with Pedro Morales in Chicago. He was in the Wrestler Football Battle Royal. Although Bruno it wasn't Bruno's favorite time of his career. He did have an action figure, an LJN action figure, which I had. A lot of people had the Bruno LJN figure. And it was a good-looking figure, too. And Bruno was kind of on the periphery as a commentator of that Rock and Wrestling Connection, 85, 86. But when Paul Orndorff turned against Hulk Hogan, there was Bruno Sammartino wrestling Paul Orndorff at house shows, wrestling Roddy Piper at house shows in 1985 and 1986, and wrestling Randy Macho Man Savage. I mean, the famous Steamboat Savage match from, I believe, February of 87. Well, who interviewed Macho Man Randy Savage afterwards? Bruno Sammartino. They got into a tussle, and the next thing you know, you have Bruno versus Macho Man Randy Savage at house shows leading up to WrestleMania 3. So, I mean, that's quite a career. And what we didn't really talk about so much, Sal, a little bit, was just Bruno's humble upbringing, hiding from the Nazi soldiers during World War II, his mother valiantly getting food for the family. That story is just so profound, the love and respect that Bruno, he cherished his mother because of how she was a survivor and how she helped their family merely survive. If it wasn't for the strength of Bruno's mom, there would be no Bruno Sammartino and possibly no World Wrestling Entertainment as we know it today.
I would say that's very accurate. Bruno's mother was his hero. The climb down, if you see this movie that Angela was talking about, the movie is a lot of the story of the mother and what she went through. This mountain was an amazing thing to be able to climb down and climb back up. I can tell you right now, my mom, no matter how much desire she had, I don't think she could have went through this. And of course, Bruno contracting rheumatic fever, which ultimately is what he died from. They say, unless something else kills you first, if you have rheumatic fever, you will die from rheumatic fever. Most people don't make it to 65.
True.
Bruno, because he was in such great shape, did make it longer. But there's no question, Bruno's mom was his hero. There's no way to put that. And what she did was beyond my comprehension. They were almost killed up there by Nazi soldiers. I mean, the whole thing was crazy. But listen, I just want to address Bruno wrestled Zbyszko, and of course that was to give Larry the bump he needed on Bruno's way out. It was a great idea. They did it well. Vince McMahon Sr. really wanted it to be one of those kind of things where they were just going to go one time around. Larry almost exploded. Bruno, made a motion for him to just be quiet, that he'd handle it. And then, of course, it turned into the great angle it was. Now, sometime after that, Bruno was supposed to open up the Meadowlands and work against George Steele.
Right.
The Meadowlands, like every other building project that goes on almost anywhere in the country, was very delayed. So Bruno hung on because he had promised to open the building up like he opened up the Nassau Coliseum when it first opened. After that, he had a deal where he agreed to go work for Baba for 10 days as a final tour. When he got there, he found out instead of wrestling Baba, he was going to be a tag team partner of Baba's, which he was obviously fine with. He had a great respect for Baba. They never had anything more than a handshake agreement, and there was never a pre-discussed amount of fee on the front end. I want to be very clear. After the matches with Baba, if it was strictly up to Bruno, he would have never wrestled again, period. Now, for various reasons, all these other things were done. and Bruno did them, but it would have not been by choice. Bruno was somebody who actually wanted to walk away. Now, do I think he should have walked away? Quite honestly, I don't. I didn't think he should walk away. He was still a great drawing card, and the WWF knew that. And so, for various reasons, he would get back in the ring, and do things. But,
and Sal, it's that exact reason, Sal, that I think Bruno should have walked away and left on top. I think had he done that when he chose to, we would be talking about a very different Bruno. He was already legendary. He's already iconic. This would put him into almost godlike territory. And in some fans' minds, he's in that stratosphere now. But I believe Bruno's last official match actually did take place in the Meadowlands, and his tag partner was Hulk Hogan, of all people.
I think that was Baltimore.
Yeah, it was in Baltimore against, I think, maybe the one-man gang, and
Bundy and the Gang, Baltimore, and I just had to jump in because I know that story well. Because guess what? About 2 or 3 weeks after that match is when I was a very young guy, and I met Bruno Sammartino at the wrestling convention for fans at the Ramada Hotel. It was headlined by Bruno Sammartino. Killer Kowalski was at the convention. A young Scotty the Body that would become Raven was there. He hadn't won a match yet. Tom Brady was there. And some other wrestling folks were there. Very interesting convention. But even as a young kid, when we knew that Bruno Sammartino and Killer Kowalski were going to be in the room, we had never seen them wrestle each other, me and my friend that were there, my friend Randy. But we were afraid that Bruno and Killer were going to start beating each other up in the middle of this convention. And because the folklore of wrestling was so strong that we thought that these two old guys were going to, not too old, but these two guys were going to tear into each other. These old enemies is what I meant.
Mikey, it was believable.
It was believable.
And that's the thing about Bruno, Sal. He was believable.
He was very believable, and he was a legitimate strongman. Now, what I can tell you about the Baltimore thing is when Bruno I think they were in Houston the day before, he thought he was going to Baltimore to do some promotional stuff. When he got there, Monsoon let him know that he was teaming with Hogan, and, so he needed to work. And at that point is when he finally drew the line in the sand. He said, listen, this is it. After tonight, I'm done. It doesn't matter if you advertise me somewhere. I'm not going to be there. Make sure they know that. So that was that. But look, a whole generation got to see him. But he would always say to me, Sal, you never saw me in my prime when I was doing all kinds of different things. And but when you talk to these guys, because all these guys worked for me and they were friends. When Paul Orndorff first came to the WWF, me and Oscar the Wild Samoan were in the Allentown airport waiting for him to come down the escalator. So I met him in the WWF territory before anybody there met him. And you talk to him about working with Bruno, he was always thrilled to death. You talk to the Honky Tonk Man, he'll tell you about how Bruno had to be thrown as a substitute because somebody couldn't make it. He said, Sal, we didn't even have time to cut promos. All they did was put a little cryon on the bottom of the screen saying that Bruno was wrestling me. We still sold the place out. These guys were all just as happy to have the chance to wrestle Bruno. Like I got a chance to referee the match where Bruno was the second for his son. So for all of us, fine. But Bruno had to look. He just didn't want to be remembered like some of the guys that were hanging on longer than they needed to, and he always made himself that promise. And even though he wasn't doing things anymore, taking backdrops and doing all the things that he did when he was young, the bottom line is his matches were always very exciting. The people believed, and he gave it everything that he had.
And I'll tell you
he wasn't going to let anybody show him up.
He sure did, and I'll tell you what, we barely scratched the surface. At some point, Sal, I would love to have you back on.
Sure, whenever you like.
Terrific. Well, I'll tell you what, we're gonna call it a night for this show. The book is Bruno Sammartino, the autobiography of wrestling's living legend. And the author is Sal Corrente, edited by Colin Bowman. Mikey, any questions or comments before we say goodnight to Sal?
Well, I just definitely want to thank you, Angelo, for having me on this show this week. Tag teaming, I'm the substitute for Jeff the Ref. Give Jeff the Ref our best. And Sal, really looking forward to reading your book. And for those that need a little bit of evidence that I just the Piper's Pit with Bruno Sammartino, I want to say from Nassau Coliseum, I want to say from 1985, maybe 86. But if people can find that, it's a very simple video to find. Piper's Pit live arena with Bruno Sammartino, and it is loaded. It is vintage Piper heel, and Bruno more than carries himself very well in that segment in front of a live, probably 18 or 20,000 people, and those were the days. Everybody,
are you talking about the one where he called Bruno a stupid wop?
I am, yes, but
that would be Madison Square Garden, not Nassau Coliseum.
Well, thank you, Sal. Madison Square Garden. Can you imagine the emotion of people going to that show? You can feel it through the video. Even now, 30-something years later, that people are so behind Bruno when he's dealing with, at this time, who was deemed to be the young punk Roddy Piper. And people wanted Bruno to kill this guy. And that's the real emotion.
And don't forget, too, the Garden was 90% Italians.
And Piper and Bob Orton are lucky to get out of there in one piece.
Bruno, when he appeared at the Garden, every Italian in the 5 boroughs of New York came out to see him.
Well, they loved him. And, the one thing that I will close with, because it was always such a funny story to me, is Bruno and Lou Albano, and there's a whole much larger story to the whole thing, but Bruno and Lou Albano got along very well. It was Bruno that actually got Lou to start managing, because at the time Altamore was the mouthpiece for the Sicilians, not Lou. But Bruno knew that Lou could do this job. But I guess Lou came up with it. At some point, he did an interview and said, "I'm so embarrassed to be an Italian, I want to change my name to Lou Albin." I mean, the fans, according to Bruno, just went nuts, because the Italians, I just get such a kick. Lou was hysterical. I mean, I got to tell you, he was so funny. I mean, a lot of times he would repeat stuff, but he really was funny. And the real test, and Bruno always says why Lou is the best manager, is because, and it happened a lot. When things were down in April, normally Lou would be asked to put on the tights. When somebody couldn't make it, they didn't get somebody else. "Hey, Lou, can you fill in with your tag team? Hey, Lou, can you, because they knew people just wanted to see anybody kill this guy. Look, there were spot shows, I remember. They had Lou Albano in the ring against Andre the Giant and made this. I mean, a manager, even though it's a spot show, it's not the Garden. You got how many guys in the territory? Well, let's let Lou, because the people really want to see Andre kill Lou. You know what I mean? Absolutely. Whether it was 2 minutes or 20 minutes, people were just happy for Lou to get beat up. So, that managing tandem, there's something we could talk about. But Freddie and Lou and Ernie, I mean, these guys were absolutely fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
But I know you guys are ready to wrap, so if you ever want to do this again, let me know. I appreciate the kind words.
Sal, you can count on a part 2. That's a given.
Well, thank you very much, sir.
We've barely scratched the surface. The book, once again, Bruno Sammartino, The Autobiography of Wrestling's Living Legend, authored by Sal Corrente, edited by Colin Bowman. Sal, thank you so much for joining us. We'll catch up with you later, my friend. Take care.
You're welcome, and please give my best to Davey O'Hannon in a couple of weeks when you have him on.
I sure will. In fact, you know what? Why don't we do this while I got you here? Let's commit to having you and Davey on together. I'm sure he would love it.
Great. Be more than happy to.
Terrific. And so we'll plan that show. I'll talk to Davey.
Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. Good night, Sal. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Good night, Mike.
Good night.
All right, Mike. It's just you and I, my friend.
That was fun. Good stuff.
That was a great interview.
That was great. The funny thing is, that's the book I have, is that first edition. I had to Google it because I was I was a little confused. So I have that first edition that he was
Yeah,
talking
there's
about.
a couple different covers.
Yes, yes. The cover I have is Bruno in a suit, like age 55 or 60 or something, and so
Right, leaning on the ropes.
It's kind of like the Arn Anderson book. It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
Doesn't break kayfabe, but anyway, I'll make sure and get Sal's version. It does sound pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's an amazing book. It's the cover of Bruno in the ring, in the thinker pose.
Yep.
And
yep.
So let us, before we sign off, let us make sure that we get all of Mike Messier's social in here. All your film festivals. My God, you've got like 3,000 film festivals you're doing right now.
Yeah, I'm going to be in North Carolina on February 15th for the Mad Monster Party Ball, Charlotte, North Carolina. I want to say it's the Sheraton Hotel, but just look up Mad Monster 2020, Charlotte, North Carolina, February 14th through 18th. The Saturday, the 15th at 4:30, I'll be sharing the world premiere of Oxbaker, One of the Boys, and I will be doing a Q&A. So if there's any wrestling fans, there's going to be Apollo Creed actor Carl Weathers from the Rocky movies will be at this convention. There's going to be some other horror film legends. Some beautiful women are featured as well, and women actresses, I should say, not just random women, but women in the convention world of horror and wrestling. And so I'm going to be there. You get a chance to meet Mike Messier. Of course, my own film festival, Avalonia Festival, Film Festival. You can find that on distancefromavalon.com or avaloniafestival.com. I've got my theater festival coming up in June. If anyone's in the Jacksonville, Florida area and wants to be part of a theater festival as an actor or director, behind-the-scenes person, that's not coming up till June 13th. Script submissions are still being accepted for another 6 weeks or so. And MikeMessier.com has got all your Mike Messier needs, wants, and desires. Anytime you want to find out about Mike Messier, if you want hours, literally, Angelo, hundreds of hours of entertainment, watch Messier Mantra. Watch all the Messier Mantras. You'll meet a lot of interesting people through that show.
I think it's fair to say that Mike Messier is all over the place right now. Yep. And if this doesn't garner you some kind of attention by the Academy, my friend, then they just don't know what good art is.
Well, Angelo, I appreciate you saying that, and I won't give the title on the air right now, but I've been working on a screenplay now for about 3 weeks that in about a week I'll be sending to you. We won't say the title or the theme of that script, but I'm looking forward to your feedback on it. So we'll keep people abreast of that. Angelo's going to take a read of this script that I've been working on and see what he has to say about it. And so onward and upward.
Absolutely. It's I want to tell you what, and I've actually seen, and I want to tell everybody before I get into that, there's a kind of an autobiographical film Mikey did that's called, what is that, Mikey, the Vampire? What is it?
It's Disregard the Vampire.
Disregard the Vampire, yes.
Mike Messier documentary is the full title.
This is as close to Mike Messier as you're going to get, because Mikey keeps things close to the vest. But I think he opened up in this in a kind of a creative outlet way of letting you into his soul. Then you'll find out who Mike Messier is and how he operates and why he does what he does. He's a fascinating guy, and I am honored and pleased to call him my friend and have him as part of our show. Also, speaking of which, Mike is also part of the Vince Russo brand. And I believe Oxbaker, One of the Boys, is on the Vince Russo brand as we speak.
That's true.
You're also a guest on Monty and the Pharaoh, our friends Jimmy Farrow and Mike Monty. I love Monty and the Pharaoh. They're great guys.
I think they're roasting me tonight because I did this video about offering to buy John Cena a fried chicken sandwich at Hooters in Charlotte, North Carolina, as a way of bridging the gap. John Cena actually legitimately blew me off years ago, and people can find that, a personal message to John Cena, on Mike Messier's YouTube channel. Unfortunately for me, my professional wrestling storyline for WWE that I slaved over for months and could really save the business creatively at the time, apparently John Cena did not agree. So Monty the Pharaoh took interest in that. Mike Monty has, I think they're kind of roasting me on the show tonight, but that's okay. But it is a thing, Angelo, that is troubling to me, because as a writer, you always have what's called pride of authorship. And when Bruno and Sal were talking about, they really didn't have that pride of authorship of the first version of Bruno's book. I don't have pride of authorship of what the WWE's been doing for the last 15 or 20 years, because I know that I could do better. And I have written better, but not being hired by them is frustrating for me. But I'm taking my creative talents to this project I mentioned to you, Angelo, that you'll be checking out in a week or so, and all the other things that we've talked about.
Fantastic, Mikey. Well, everyone, you've got Mikey's info. Of course, MikeMessier.com. That's the main hub. Where you can find everything about Mikey. And for Wrestling with the Future, it's at Twitter, Wrestling Future, Facebook.com/Wrestling with the Future. You can find us on Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Podbean, and Podbay. And wherever you find your podcast, we are all over the medium. We're on every platform. We are on YouTube. This show will usually drop on Wednesday morning and Friday morning. You can catch us every week, every Tuesday, every Thursday. We do a video format. We do an audio format. We have an amazing couple of weeks coming up. Next week, Ladies' Night. We're having all the women here. We've got Casey Carlisle, Princess Victoria, and Sorceress Morgan talking about women's wrestling. Later that week, we will have an in-depth one-on-one interview with Rico Costantino, former WWE, WWF star, former American Gladiator, former bodyguard to various high-profile celebrities. Rico will talk all about that next week. That's going to be a really interesting show. I'm looking forward to that. And we also have a special announcement tonight. Jeff the Ref Robinson, as you could tell by now, is not here tonight. Jeff is actually recording his own show, The Ref's Roundtable, that will be heard on our network. So I'm giving Jeff his own format to vent and rant, and that ought to be fun, Mikey.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure Jeff's going to do a great job. But
yeah, he will. I love Jeff. He's a great guy.
Angelo, there's one other thing that you should mention.
Oh, yes. We have our first official merch. We have the Wrestling with the Future t-shirt is now available. We're proud to announce that it is our logo on a shirt. They are available in large, extra large, and 2X. And I had a special made just for Jeff. It's a one-of-a-kind 6X.
There you go.
And it looks like a pup tent on me.
Well,
we will have that, and that'll be up on our Podbean website. That's our main hub. And of course on Facebook. That's where you can find us on social media. Wrestling with the Future on Facebook. Just search us. We're everywhere.
It's a sharp looking shirt.
Do a Google search or Yahoo, and we are the first ones to pop up. So, on behalf of Mike Messier, I am Psychic Medium Angelo. Goodbye, everybody. Good night, and we will see you at the matches. Happy wrestling, folks. Bye-bye.